On June 26, 2000, the Vatican released what it claimed was the entire text of the Third Secret of Fatima, which consisted of 62 lines of text written by Sister Lucy on what appeared to be 4 sheets of paper. Those 4 pages, which contain no words of the Blessed Virgin Mary, present an ambiguous vision. An angel is holding a sword that gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire. The flames are repelled by the Blessed Virgin. Then a bishop, clothed in white, apparently the Pope, is seen hobbling through a half-ruined city filled with corpses. The afflicted Pope makes his way to the top of a hill outside the ruined city, and kneeling before the cross, he is killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way, there died, one after another, the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. 2 angels gather up the blood of these martyrs and sprinkle it on the souls making their way to God. The Vatican commentary on the purported secret suggested that this vision pertains to the failed assassination attempt on John Paul II on May 13, 1981, in which the Pope was not killed. Given the lack of any explanation of the vision by the Blessed Virgin herself, Catholics were widely skeptical about the completeness of the Vatican's disclosure. How could the Virgin Mary have remained silent on the meaning of the Third Secret of Fatima?
According to the Vatican's interpretation of the Third Secret of Fatima, which is essentially Cardinal Sodano's interpretation, this ambiguous vision of the bishop in white being killed at the top of a hill before a large wooden cross is basically all there is to the Third Secret of Fatima, and it relates essentially to the assassination attempt, the failed assassination attempt in 1981. The only problem with this attempt at an interpretation is that it fails to mention any of the things that Fatima scholars, those who read the Third Secret, anyone who had any knowledge of this matter, knew were involved in the Third Secret. The loss of faith in the Church, the liturgical changes, all of the things talked about in the prophecy of Pius XII about the suicide of altering the faith in the Church's liturgy, theology, and soul, the apostasy in the Church that begins at the top. There isn't a single reference to any of this in the Vatican's interpretation of the Third Secret. And why is that? Because what they published in June of 2000 doesn't contain a single word of the Blessed Virgin Mary to explain the vision of the bishop in white. She is utterly silent on the contents of the Third Secret, and that doesn't add up.
You know, Sister Lucy said that the secret should be opened in 1960 because it would become clearer then. Then we were told in 2000 that the Third Secret was about an assassination attempt against John Paul II in 1981. Why would an assassination attempt in 1981 become clearer in 1960?
The Vatican put out its interpretation of the Third Secret of Fatima in the year 2000. If it had been a plebe paper that I had received from one of my plebes in the freshman English course at the Naval Academy, I would have flunked it, because the interpretation does not in any way correspond with the facts.
I gave a talk one time on the Third Secret, and I read word for word what was released in the vision. And then I said to the audience, and the Vatican's interpretation of this is that this is a prediction of an assassination attempt against Pope John Paul II, and I have the recording. The audience laughed. The audience laughed at it, because at face value, it's just nonsense.
Does the Vatican's interpretation of this vision make any sense? Well, Sister Lucy explains in her own words how she understood this vision, and what she saw. She depicted what she saw. This bishop in white, who is presumably the Pope, is shot and killed by a band of soldiers. The Vatican's interpretation is that somehow this refers to the assassination attempt on the life of John Paul II, of course. There are problems there. John Paul II was not shot by a band of soldiers. He was shot and wounded by one lone gunman. I I think that alone is enough to dismiss the Vatican's interpretation as being nonsensical, because it simply does not add up. It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense that there would be so much fuss and weeping and gnashing of teeth on the part of people who saw the third secret before that, if it was about an assassination attempt which wouldn't succeed anyway.
It's so silly, even the New York Times looked at it and went, huh?
The Washington Post said very clearly, look, Cardinal Sodano said that the Pope falls apparently dead. But the vision of the secret leaves no doubt of what happens to the Pope. It says he's killed. So, Your Eminence, you weren't being honest with us. You gave us a falsified picture in order to force fit your interpretation upon it.
There are very specific images in what they claim is the third secret. Their interpretation does not match it at all.
There's other things the Washington Post pointed out that doesn't jibe. First of all, that the Pope in the vision is killed by a group of soldiers. But on May 13, 1981, there was not a group of soldiers, there was a single gunman. And the Post said, in the vision, cardinals, bishops, priests, lay people are also killed. But on May 13, 1981, no one else was shot at except Pope John Paul II.
A man in white climbing a hill who is shot with bullets and arrows and falls dead is not someone who is shot with a gunshot and recovers. It does not connect. It's not solid or even intelligent interpretation.
And the idea that this Bishop of White walking through a ruined city, through the bodies of his priests and prelates up to a hill where he's going to be assassinated, had nothing whatsoever in common with Aliaga, taking a couple shots at John Paul II in St. Peter's Square. There was nothing, there was no correspondence between the events.
For example, what is the half-deserted city, the desolated city? What does that mean? Does that mean an atomic war? Does that mean, is that an image of the church? That's not made clear at all or spoken of.
There's just overwhelming circumstantial evidence to indicate that we're dealing with a two-part secret, as Father Schweigel said, involving two distinct texts. It's so obvious that even Italian television commentaries are talking about the theory of le due buste, or the two envelopes, to use the Italian phrase.
It is impossible not to notice the number of discrepancies between what was known about the secret prior to 2000 and what was revealed on June 26th of that year.
We know that the Vatican said in 1960 that it was not going to reveal the third secret of Fatima to the world as expected. And in making that anonymous announcement through a press agency, it referred specifically to, and I think I'm quoting verbatim, the words of the Virgin which she confided to the three seers. So there was a specific reference in 1960 to the words of the Virgin in the third secret of Fatima. And yet the text published by the Vatican in June of 2000 involves a vision of the Pope in white being shot down and so forth, in which we find no words whatsoever uttered by Our Lady of Fatima. None. So already we have a major discrepancy. There must be a text, the one referred to by the Vatican back in 1960, that contains words of Our Lady confided to the seers.
There is a discrepancy regarding when Pope John Paul II first read the third secret.
This is an amazing discrepancy. It appears that Pope John Paul II read two different texts of the secret, one in 1978 and one in 1981. And it was the Washington Post, the July 1st, 2000 Washington Post, that pointed out this discrepancy. Here's what it said. Contradictory statements from Vatican officials about when the Pope first read the secret added to the confusion. On May 13th, Vatican spokesman Joaquim Novara Valls said that the Pope first read the secret within days of assuming the papacy in 1978. On Monday, June 26, 2000, an aide to Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, prefect of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, said that the Pope first saw it in the hospital after his attack in 1981. This is yet more evidence that we appear to be dealing with two texts.
Another discrepancy surfaces from Bishop Venanzio's 1957 testimony regarding the secret.
We know that when Bishop Venanzio held the sealed envelope containing the secret up to the light, he saw inside that envelope one sheet of paper. But The text produced by the Vatican in June of 2000 consists of 4 sheets of paper. So you have 2 texts. One, a handwritten single sheet, and the other, 4 pages of handwriting.
Another discrepancy surfaces from Bishop Venanzio's 1957 testimony regarding the secret.
When the Bishop of Fatima held that sealed envelope up to the light, he saw what he estimated to be about 25 lines of text on that single sheet of paper. The Vatican's text, produced in June of 2000, contains 62 lines of text. 25 lines in one, 62 lines in another. Clearly, we're dealing with 2 different documents.
There is also a discrepancy regarding where the secret had been stored in the Vatican.
We know from press coverage in Paris Match magazine that a text of the Third Secret of Fatima ended up in a wooden safe in the papal apartments in the 1950s. We know this because a picture was provided in Paris Match magazine showing that very papal safe. And yet, the Vatican tells us in June of 2000 that the text of the Third Secret they were producing at that time had been stored in the Holy Office archives, a totally different location. Once again, we're looking at 2 texts.
And finally, the question must be asked, where is heaven's explanation of the secret?
We know that when Our Lady spoke to the Fatima seers, she explained everything that they saw. Even something as obvious as hell, she explained to them. She said, and I quote, "You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go." Now, it was obvious they had seen hell. They saw souls burning in hell and floating about in the state of agony, and yet she explained that to them. But here we have this ambiguous vision of a Bishop of White with an angel in heaven sending fire down toward the earth, the Pope being executed by a band of soldiers outside a half-ruined city, the Pope processing through the ruins of the city with dead bodies of clergy and laity alongside him, and absolutely no explanation of Our Lady.
There were a number of things in that document that gave the appearance of trying to undermine the Fatima message itself and even undermine certain doctrinal points regarding our Blessed Mother. First of all Catholics know that the Immaculate Heart of Mary is the heart closest to Christ. There's only one Immaculate Heart because Our Lady was the Immaculate Conception. She's born free from original sin. And in entire life, she was free from actual sin. There's only one Immaculate Heart. But the June 26 commentary, when it mentions Immaculate Heart, first of all, it puts it in lowercase I, lowercase h, something Catholics never do. And it basically says that an Immaculate Heart is any heart that says yes to Christ. Now, this not only undermines the Fatima message, but it also undermines the Catholic doctrine itself on the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Second, our Blessed Mother said at Fatima that in the end, her Immaculate Heart would triumph. But this June 26 commentary implies that the triumph of the Immaculate Heart took place 2,000 years ago when Our Lady gave her fiat to the angel at the Annunciation, when she consented to be the Mother of God. So what this commentary does is it takes a prophecy of Fatima, of Our Lady of Fatima, that's supposed to take place in the future. It puts it back, it kicks it back 2,000 years ago, so there's no longer a prophecy. This is an undermining of the Fatima message. Another thing, the June 26, 2000 commentary says, and I'm going to quote it, that the concluding part of the secret uses images Lucy may have seen in devotional books and which draw their inspiration from ancient intuitions of faith. Now, this appears to be a subtle way of suggesting that the entire secret of Fatima was not something that Lucy received from heaven, but just there were ideas that came to her while she was reading devotional books. And this is a bogus argument that enemies of Fatima have been using for years to try to discredit Fatima. And worse, one of the most troubling aspects of this entire commentary is that the only Fatima expert that is quoted in the document, so-called Fatima expert, is a priest named Father Edward Donis. Now, Father Donis was a modernist Jesuit who throughout the entire 1940s and 50s and even beyond that made a veritable career of trying to discredit Fatima. He cast doubt on any revelation that Lucy received after 1917. He implied that Lucy invented the Fatima secret. And other Fatima scholars at the time tried to convince Donis that his thesis was wrong, that he was mistaken. And after World War II, They even invited him to come to Fatima, come to Coimbra, interview Sister Lucy, so that he could check the primary documentation, interview Sister Lucy, and get his facts straight. Father Donis refused to go to Fatima, he refused to go to Coimbra, and he refused to meet Sister Lucy. And during this time, a true scholar named Father Hubert Jedin, talking of Father Donis, he says, "Is this really the mark of a sound critical mind?" Yet Father Donis was the only so-called Fatima scholar quoted in the June 26 commentary on Fatima. So it's no wonder that the June 27th Los Angeles Times, a secular newspaper, said regarding the Vatican's treatment of Fatima, it said, "The Vatican's top theologian gently debunked the Fatima cult."
Those in the Vatican who are possessed of this modernist way of thinking feel greatly threatened by the message of Fatima. And since they cannot suppress entirely what the Church has approved, they therefore seek to debunk it by putting a new spin on the message, to reinterpret the message, to make the message appear to be in agreement with their modernistic manner of thought.